Unlike a lot of other software applications, you can't just open Peachtree and start putting in accounting transactions. Actually, that's not exactly true. Let me explain. In Peachtree, it needs to know a little bit about what your company is and how it operates so that it can create and configure itself to work the way that you need it to. In Peachtree, we call this creating a company file, and it's the first step. In this chapter, we'll take you through a little bit of preliminary information so you can make sure you have all of the information together that you'll need in order to create a company file that's most appropriate so you can get to work with Peachtree. As the Boy Scouts so wisely say, it's best to be prepared, and preparing to create a company file is no exception. You need to gather a little bit of information so that when you start to create the file on the computer, you have the information you need and you don't spend time running around trying to find it at that point. First of all, you need some basic business information, things like your formal company name. Now, that isn't the one that it goes by in conversation that everybody thinks of, which may be a shortened version, but the full legal name. You also need to know what your business entity type is, and if you have a tax or employee ID number, a TIN, or an EIN, you should know that as well. You also need to select a start date for the accounts in Peachtree. Now, that could be as of today, it could be the start of next month, it could be last month, or you could go all the way back to the beginning of the year. But it is a decision that needs to be made. So records in Peachtree will be accurate as of what date. We also need to have most current details about some of the transactions that are going on. For example, you should have bank, loan, and credit card statements. That way you can get your balances and even add in some entries if you need to. You also should have any current bills that you owe or your accounts payable, and money that's due to you or accounts receivable. Hopefully you have more AR than you do AP. If you have any current inventory, you should take a current inventory, make sure it's accurate, so that can be entered. And then again, any employee, customer, vendor, and product lists, as well as lists of assets like furniture, computer equipment, or vehicles. It sounds like a lot, and we want to have it all together when we first get started so we can have a good start to our file. There are also some accounting decisions that you have to make. Will you be using cash or accrual accounting methods? What accounting periods will you use? What posting method do you want? While many of these settings can be changed in the software later, it's always a good idea to be accurate as soon as possible. Also, then you don't have to go back and change things and possibly forget to change them, and then you have bad data. The most important thing, though, is that the accounting method and the periods cannot be changed once the file is created, so you absolutely have to make sure those are correct. When we talk about business entities, this is something that you and or your partners and or your attorney and your bookkeeper or your accountant have probably discussed. What kind of business entity are you? If you're brand new and you're a small business, you may be a sole proprietor. Actually, there are some rather large businesses that are sole proprietors. The main difference here is that they file a Schedule C with personal taxes, and the person is not separate from the business. This is also sometimes called a DBA. In other words, in the eyes of the law and the IRS, they really are the same person or the same entity, they're just using different names. A partnership is also something you've probably heard of. They file tax form 1065, and partnerships are common for law firms, professional associations like medical partnerships, those types of things. And this, of course, affords a little bit of special protection, especially when it comes to liability. The new player on the field is an LLC, or a limited liability company. It's actually been around for a while now, but it is a relative newcomer and is very, very popular. It's popular because it's a happy medium between being a sole proprietor or being a corporation or a partnership. You get to still claim things on personal taxes, or at least you can do that, but you also have all of the legal protections. So if the company gets sued, the owners or the partners don't get sued. When you have an LLC, you might file a Schedule C, or an 1120, an 1120S, or an 1165. They're kind of in this never land where they're a blend of a lot of different things. You'll also probably have an attorney or a bookkeeper or an accountant help you make the choice and fill out the paperwork to become an LLC. Then, of course, we get to the big kahuna, as they say, a full corporation. You can either be a C Corp or an S Corp. They file tax forms 1120 and 1120S. This is what most of us think of when we think of as business, where the business is separate. The primary difference with a corporation is you no longer have owners. Instead, you have shareholders. Even if you're a small business, maybe you're owned by yourself and your spouse, you may be the only shareholders, but you still, when you create the corporation, have to say which one of you gets which percentage of the shares and have them distributed. Corporations, of course, have the utmost of legal protection where the corporation truly is separate from all of the shareholders. If something happens to the corporation, whether it be something as far as a liability lawsuit or bankruptcy, that is supposedly going to be very separate from the shareholders. Even though sometimes people do get personal guarantees, really the basis of a corporation is that separation of responsibility. You need to make a choice on this business entity, and it probably should have already been done before you came to Peachtree. If you need some help, please ask for it from either an accountant or an attorney. The next thing we need to decide is what type of accounting period do we want. This is something that some people don't even think about. They just go with a regular old calendar year. It starts on January 1st, it goes through December 31st, just like the regular tax year probably does. But you do have a choice. When you're working with a business, you can use a fiscal year, and a fiscal year could be the same as the calendar year, but it also could have different types of periods, in other words, more than 12 months, or it could start in the middle of the year. Remember that your accounting periods cannot be changed once they're selected and in the company file. Peachtree gives you the option of having 12 monthly periods, and you can choose a starting month, or accounting periods that don't match the calendar. Now that could be a custom fiscal year structure. For example, you might break your fiscal year into quarters, or you might have 13 4-week periods instead of 12 periods that are varying numbers of days. This again is something that should be carefully considered, and if you need some advice, there are plenty of places you can get it, as well as some information that's good on the internet. Something you may have not thought of before at all is a posting method, especially if you've never used electronic software. This comes down to how Peachtree processes or transfers transactions from individual journals to the general journal, and Peachtree has several options. Actually, it has 2 options. You can do real-time posting or you can do batch posting. Real-time posting posts to both as you enter and save transactions, so it's immediate. As soon as you create an invoice, for example, it's posted. As soon as you create a payment, it's posted. Batch posting saves transactions and posts them in a group when it's initiated. Now, a lot of times larger companies will do this. For example, they will post things on Friday afternoons. This does give people an opportunity to look at the transaction journals, for example, or the registers and make sure that everything looks right before things are actually posted. Honestly, in my experience, most smaller companies usually work with real-time posting, and since we're using electronic software, it really is the most recommended method that I see, at least in my type of work. You can switch methods at any time, so if you're not sure which one you need, maybe you can try one, and then you can always switch it later. There's no requirement that you have to stick with the one you choose, unlike a couple of our other decisions we've had to make. We've talked a little bit about the chart of accounts, and you understand what's there. But when it comes to this part, we're talking about creating the company file. This is going to be the names that are used to classify the transactions that appear, and we want them to appear appropriately on our financial statements. Now, even though there are a lot of accounts that are always the same, sometimes they're a little bit different based on the type of business. So Peachtree has a couple of options. First of all, you can set them up using a simplified chart of accounts, which is just what it sounds like, kind of a bare minimum, if you will. Or you can set up using an extensive chart of accounts. Both of these allow you to select sample types of industries. So you can say you're in retail or you're a beauty salon or a bakery, something like that, and it will give you the recommended types of accounts you can have. You also can copy your accounts from an existing Peachtree company if you're moving over from a different company or you have something that you want to copy. And you also can convert from another type of accounting program, such as QuickBooks or even Microsoft Accounting. And lastly, you can build your own. Now, I don't really recommend building your own. I think any one of these other options is going to be better. Even if you know that you're going to have to do a lot of modifications, it's usually easier to let a computer create the list of accounts, and then you can go in and modify, delete, or create new ones as necessary.